Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks. And this week we're taking a look at rosewood fingerboards and maple fingerboards. Is there really a difference? Maple fingerboards sound bright and snappy, rosewood fingerboards sound dark and warm. Is a sentiment you'll no doubt hear repeated ad nauseum in the guitar community. It's something I've been guilty of parroting myself without really much consideration, and if I'm entirely honest, it's something that I've never really given much thought at all. It's just an accepted fact. Or is it? And before we get into that, just a quick mention of the fact that the guys at Music Radar have been kind enough to nominate Friday Fretworks, and myself by extension, in the Best Online Guitar Personality of 2020 nominations. If you felt so inclined to drop me or Friday Fretworks a vote, I'll stick the link down in the description box. The purported tonal benefits of rosewood is a discussion that's raged on for literally decades in the guitar industry, but made headlines again more recently in 2017 when the CITES restrictions around the use of rosewood were significantly tightened. CITES, if you're not familiar, is the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. And what this means for the guitar world is it essentially keeps an eye on what wood is being used and ultimately whether its usage is sustainable. Now, of course, Brazilian rosewood has had very tight restrictions since the early 1990s, but in 2017, CITES announced that there were now going to be tight restrictions around the use of Indian rosewood, and any guitars manufactured using this material would have their own import and export licenses or certificates. Of course, this extra layer of kind of complication or bureaucracy obviously caused a significant ripple in the guitar industry, and many manufacturers very quickly looked to restriction-free alternatives. Richlight, ebony, baked maple, or in Fender's case, favour, which they now offer on all of their Mexican-made instruments. The good news is that in November of 2019, CITES lifted the restriction around the guitar industry's use of Indian rosewood, confirming what many people already suspected, to be honest. In this case, it's not the guitar industry that is the problem, but furniture manufacturers. However, Brazilian rosewood is still very much a protected species, and if you are looking to travel internationally with a guitar containing Brazilian rosewood, you need to acquire all the correct paperwork and certificates, or risk having your instrument confiscated or, at worst, destroyed. So given rosewood presents so many problems, why even consider using it in guitar manufacturing at all? Now, it won't come as any surprise that rosewood harvesting hasn't always been so tightly regulated, or in some cases even monitored at all, which unsurprisingly is why we find ourselves in the situation that we are in today. Rosewood actually has a centuries-old relationship with guitar or instrument manufacturer, but it really saw a boom in the 1950s and 60s, with companies like Fender and Gibson using rosewood exclusively for fingerboard material, which, coupled with liberal usage in other industries, saw a severe shortage of Brazilian rosewood in the late 1960s. Much has been made over the reasons that Fender made the switch from maple to rosewood fingerboards in 1959, invariably speculation about various tonal benefits of each wood, but given it was Leo Fender making decisions, a famously practical man, it's more likely that the decision was indeed practical, and depending on what you read, either came at musicians' behest, or indeed Leo himself one evening seeing one of his maple neck guitars on TV looking decidedly dirty. Of course, maple over time absorbs oil and dirt into the grain of the wood and starts to look a little bit weathered. Rosewood, by comparison, being much darker, of course will weather, but much less visibly, and as such, whatever the reason, Fender made the switch wholesale in mid-1959, or in the Jazzmaster's case, in late 1958, setting the stage for 61 years of discussion, rosewood or maple. As I said, the common train of thought is that the harder maple with its tighter, consistent grain produces a brighter, zingier sound, whereas the darker rosewood with its looser, variable grain produces a darker, warmer sound. Now, it may just be a case that this perception was formed coincidentally around a time of musical change. Of course, the late 1950s saw the advent of rock and roll, with the likes of Buddy Holly and Hank Marvin, with the bridge pickup heavy strat tones, very jangly, piercing guitar tones being particularly instrumental. Mid-60s, of course, onwards saw the likes of Hendrix with fuzz pedals, darker, more saturated guitar tones that were inherently a little bit warmer. If there is a difference between the two, it may well come down to the fact that the construction of each is markedly different. Of course, maple fingerboards tending to be a part of one solid piece of maple that also comprises the neck. Rosewood fingerboards then being a separate layer of rosewood, either a veneer or slab, depending on which era Fender we're talking about, glued onto a maple neck. Obviously, markedly different construction techniques that arguably will produce different tones. Either way, the best course of action to get to the bottom of this discussion is just to actually play some guitar. So for this video, I'm going to be using a Fender American Pro 2 Telecaster in Mystic Surf Green with a rosewood neck, pitting it up against another Fender American Pro 2 Telecaster in Mystic Surf Green, but with a maple neck. A bit of a Frankentelli straight from Fender, which unfortunately isn't actually available to buy at this point in time, and even more unfortunately for me, we'll be going straight back to Fender as soon as this video is finished. Either way, it's not very often you get two near enough identical guitars, same pickup height, same strings, same colour, save for one major difference, obviously, with the neck material. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to try and put it through its paces and get to the bottom of an age-old discussion. Rosewood or maple, is there really a difference? So there you have it. Now, I'm not going to say too much at the end of the video, as part of the fun of these kind of things is letting you come to your own conclusions. But one thing I would definitely say is that there were simultaneously more and less differences than I was expecting. You'll probably agree that in the context of a band mix with a bit of gain and delay and overdrive at the start of the video, the differences are very subtle, and I probably could have got away with mixing and matching the audio and you probably wouldn't have noticed. In isolation, there was actually more difference than I was expecting, and it's interesting to see that cliches are invariably cliches for a reason, and it was good to see the maple neck holding up to its reputation with that bright, sharp attack that suits a Telecaster particularly well, actually. That said, it really did surprise me to see that there was actually more depth and kind of warmth in the maple neck than I was definitely expecting. The Rosewood fingerboard to me sounded a little bit more cultured, maybe a little bit more characterful and colour and bloom around the notes. Definitely a more prominent mid-range, I would say, whereas the maple neck definitely had a more prominent high end. But in honesty, if there is a preference on my part there, it may well come down to the fact that I tend to lean towards Rosewood necks, so make of that what you will. Ultimately, I would say the biggest difference isn't in sound, but in feel. Of course, maple being faster and smoother under the finger, so if you're looking for a kind of tight, quick attack, I would say maple is probably a good way to go, whereas if you're looking for something, as I said, for me at least a little bit more colourful, a little bit more characterful, Rosewood is probably a good shout. Ultimately, though, it is, of course, personal preference. As ever, I'm Chris Buck. You're watching Friday Fretworks. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already. It really does help, and I shall see you next week for another episode. Cheers, guys. Take care, and I'll see you soon.